Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library in Massachusetts. And if you have been in the path of this massive storm, I so appreciate you guys being here. Victoria was as well. And so we're doing everything we can to make sure that we can have this program tonight. We're very excited to have it. We're excited that you're here. I just wanted to say a couple things before we get started. Thanks to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. We couldn't do it without them. I'd like to thank Victoria for letting us share this program with other libraries because, as you know, when libraries work together, we make magic, and we certainly have with this one. So Victoria's going to show some slides. She's going to be talking about her book about homesteading. Let me just get the exact title. Creating a Modern Homestead. And yes, there you go. Beautiful. Look at that beautiful cover. She's going to show some slides. I'm going to turn the chat off for publicly while she's doing her slides, but you can ask her questions during her slides. They just won't pop up for everybody, so they won't be distracting. If you have questions for after the talk, put them in the Q&A. I will moderate those to Victoria after the slides. And you can buy signed books by Victoria on her website, and I'll put a link to that in the recap email I'll send out to everybody. So Victoria and I have been talking for a couple of minutes before we got started, and I feel like she's like a person after my own heart. She just told me that she has a library of like 2,700 books, and I started like salivating. I was like, oh my gosh, she's a reader, she's a writer, she's like amazing. And then she has this book about homesteading, and what I loved about your bio, Victoria, was that you started homesteading out of a little tiny like suburban home where you were like you didn't have a yard, you just wanted to do it, which gives me hope for me, like that I could do something small and, with what I have, as opposed to thinking I have to do something big in order to do it. So I just love that. And I am so excited to hear what you have to say about homesteading and yourself and your family and everything that you've been doing in the last few years.
Thank you so much. Well, let me share my screen really quickly with you, as I did make some slides. Like Mina said, my book is called Creating a Modern Homestead, Traditional Skills for Real Everyday Life. Learn how to easily bring simple living and self-sufficiency into your life, no matter where you live, in a way that works for you. And this has been my passion for the last, let's see now, almost 12 years. So I'm excited to be here to talk with you about that today. So let's get started. A little bit about me. Here's my family here on the left. Jason and I have been married for 20 years, and our son James is 10, and he is just precious light of our life. And then you can see some of our chickens here. These are Barred Rock hens. And then one of my favorite pictures of a huge carrot harvest in a wheelbarrow. It was like one of our first harvests, and I was so crazy thrilled that we were able to get actual food out of seeds, and it was so miraculous. But anyway, a little bit about me. I'm Victoria Pruett, like I said, owner and author at modernhomestead.com and of the new book, Creating a Modern Homestead. My husband and I live on an 8-acre homestead in Central Texas with our son in a home we built ourselves. So we have been on the property for a little over 10 years, but we built this house ourselves and we have been here for 4 years, which was a huge blessing. And my parents live on the adjoining homestead. We currently have 37 Plymouth Rock hens, one rooster, 32 fruit trees, 147 blackberry bushes, and a half-acre vineyard. And then, of course, in Texas, some of the most beautiful oak trees you've ever seen. We also grow a half-acre garden from March through November each year, which allows us to water bath and pressure can about 1,500 quarts of food above and beyond what we eat fresh, feed to our animals, and give away. But we didn't always homestead in the country like Mina was talking about. We actually started in the city. So in 2014, we were living in the fastest growing area of Texas in a subdivision house with no yard and just dreaming of a life on a homestead. I had grown up with grandparents on both sides who loved gardening, canning, and scratch cooking, and I knew I wanted to stay connected to those roots. Doing everything we could to homestead in the city became our passion project. I bought food in bulk on sale at the grocery store and canned it in my tiny kitchen. We grew herbs and tomatoes on a small deck in the backyard. I learned how to bake high quality breads and worked hard to cook all of our food from scratch, even on a tiny budget. And I forgot to put this in there, but I was thinking back to that time in the city, and At the time, even in 2014, my husband was only making $22,000 a year. We had just had our son, and we decided that I was going to stay home. And so I quit my teaching job, but that meant that Jason had a very, very small income. He was working for a really small company. And so even then, we were living well below the poverty line, but we were able to live a wonderful, healthy lifestyle because we did embrace the idea of homesteading, even as we lived in the city. So a modern homestead was born, both my website and our passion for it. So if you're new to the idea of homesteading, I wanted to differentiate between homesteading and modern homesteading. So first, what is homesteading? Homesteading is a lifestyle focused on self-reliance and personal responsibility. Skills such as growing your own food, preserving those harvests, cooking from scratch, raising animals, and making and repairing what you need. At its core, homesteading is about providing for yourself and your family with intention. So, then what is modern homesteading? You may be surprised to hear that you can still embrace many of these skills no matter where you live. While some things like dairy cows or fields of wheat may be outside of your reach in the city, taking control of your food supply can be easily done. From a small subdivision lot to a high-rise apartment, modern homesteading is about learning how to incorporate the homesteading ideals of self-reliance into everyday life. So what skills are we talking about, and exactly how can they be worked into a busy modern life? You'll have to excuse me, my mouth goes dry really fast. So let me take a drink. So one of the easiest ways to be more in control of your food supply is to learn how to cook from scratch. You may already know this skill, but a lot of people don't start here. They start with maybe bulk food, deep pantries, that kind of thing. But cooking from scratch is a really great way to not only increase the quality of food that you're eating, but actually lower your costs. So, for example, if you're making, this potato chips from scratch, then it's only going to cost you maybe $1 to make a really high quality batch of potato chips as opposed to spending six, seven, $12 for a bag of organic potato chips that isn't going to taste as good as fresh potato chips. It also allows you to reduce the number of ingredients needed. Bread at the store is going to be 5, 6, 7, 17 ingredients, whereas the bread that you make for yourself is only going to be a couple. So getting started with from scratch cooking is definitely where I would recommend starting. And this list is going to give you a few things that you can do with that, but it's not necessarily in any order. It's just some of the things. So, simple meals like roasted meats and vegetables. This is a great way to start, actually, if you aren't familiar with scratch cooking in general. And also, if you're planning to grow food yourself or raise any meat yourself, then knowing how to cook them simply in a way that your family likes will be really useful going forward. Breads and bread products. Like I said before, it reduces the number of ingredients that you need and also allows you to simply have the ingredients on hand instead of having to have bread on hand. So, for example, you can buy bread in bulk at the store, but then you have to freeze it in order to keep it fresh. You could instead have buckets of flour properly preserved that would last 25 years. And then you could just make bread from that wheat instead of having to have the freezer space to store enough bread. You can make things like tortillas, bagels, English muffins, biscuits, cookies, all sorts of things, and have them ready to go for your family when you want them. Snack replacements, I talked about this a little bit already. It doesn't just have to be chips. You can do crackers, cookies, anything, granola bars, granola itself, cereal in general, anything that you can buy at the store, you can make yourself, and you can make it tastes better, and the quality of the ingredients is going to be higher, and it's going to cost you a lot less money. Staples such as yogurt, condiments, and seasonings. So you can make your own mayonnaise, your own barbecue sauce. You can control the type of oils that are used. We're hearing a lot about seed oils and whether or not they may be good for you. And so if you do have a concern or an allergy, perhaps, that you want to deal with, then you can make your own condiments and seasonings. I found out when I was about 18 that I was allergic to corn, and I don't know if you know it, but corn is in everything. And so I ended up having to learn how to make a lot of things from scratch. We also choose to use raw dairy, and so, making our own yogurts and things like that, ranch dressing, that's really nice for somebody who chooses to use raw milk. I can just make my own things. So that's a really great way to also save money and, like I said, increase the quality of your food. And then, of course, ready to cook meals, because just because you're cooking from scratch doesn't mean that you don't want convenience. So you can make, like I tend to make 6 pizzas at a time. I wrap them and I freeze them, and then they're ready to go, just like a frozen pizza would be from the store. But I know the ingredients in it, and it tastes a lot better, frankly. Same thing with waffles, pancakes. I do a lot of chicken pot pies, shepherd's pies. You can see down here meatloaf that I have cooked, portioned, and then froze. So then it's ready to go in bags. And so when I have a busy night or something, I can just grab however many portions of meatloaf I need, throw them in the oven, whip up some vegetables on the stove, and dinner's ready in 20 minutes. And it's very, very convenient. And then, of course,
Victoria,
yes,
question from Annette.
yes,
And I think you're going to be covering this in a little bit, but she says the time can be a huge factor to make everything from scratch. How does this work with busy modern families, or which one should we focus on?
yes. Let me answer that because that is a great question. Let me see if I can I actually just figured out how to see chat also. Let me see if I can get back to my thing here. Okay. Okay, yeah, it's not letting me close it. Oh well. Okay. Question about time management. Yes, so this is one of the biggest things that people struggle with is how do you make everything from scratch if you have a busy life? What I like to do is just batch cook. So if you're going to make one of something, it's really usually just as easy to make three, and then you freeze that. So for example, if I'm making mashed potatoes, I don't make mashed potatoes for a single meal. I make a gallon of mashed potatoes and I freeze the extras. Which if you've never had frozen mashed potatoes reheated, they are the best mashed potatoes. They're so creamy, and just like literally we barely ever have fresh mashed potatoes because frozen and reheated mashed potatoes are way better. So that kind of thing. If you're making one chicken pot pie, make two. If you're making a pizza, make three, so on and so forth. If you're going to make a loaf of bread, get another couple of bread pans and make three at a time. Um, that's what I tend to do. I've also started recently doing cuisine types in batch cooking. So I'll take a Saturday afternoon or something and I'll make a bunch of burritos, quesadillas, enchiladas, that kind of thing. And I'll put them all in the freezer. And then the next time I'll do lasagna and pizza and pasta bake and stuff like that. And I'll put those in the freezer. So we have this rotation of different types of cuisine that we enjoy. But that does make it easier because there's a lot of common ingredients that go into the same type of cuisine. So you can do that as well. Um, yeah, that's the easiest way to get started, and you can do that with pretty much anything. I think Staples is another really great one. It doesn't actually take that long to make mayonnaise. It takes like 3 minutes to make a whole batch of mayonnaise. And then from that, you can make ranch dressing and whatever else you want. So it just depends on what your family likes to eat and if you're growing any fresh food or anything like that. So, um, and then I did see while I had the chat up, I did see a question about how many freezers I have. I have a lot of freezers. So when I was living in the city, we really just had one, the freezer above our fridge, and that was it. And then we bought another freezer for the garage, and that was a stand freezer. And then now we have 5 freezers. But we also raised chickens. We also had cows. And so we have like a whole cow in 2 of the freezers. And then, we have like we raise turkeys. And so there's a lot of stuff that, when you're on a homestead, you need to have more freezer space for. And so actually the house that we built has a room that's just like a freezer room and it has all of our freezers in it. And it's been really great. But you do not have to have that in order to start cooking for your freezer. Like I said, our family of two, before we had James, I could fit about a month's worth of dinners in our above fridge freezer. So if you organize well and don't just have a bunch of stuff in your freezer, I think we tend to do that where we're like, well, I'm going to grab a bag of green beans or oh, this or that or the other thing. If you plan your space, you really can make it happen.
Thank you. I think I'm going to hold off on questions till the end so that I don't keep interrupting you unless something is very timely.
Okay, it doesn't bother me at all, but I understand that other people may not want to stop the presentation. Okay, so and then I was talking about desserts. I really like to customize the type of sugar that our family eats. We don't tend to eat a lot of white sugar. We eat maple syrup, honey, or panela, which is a raw, like no heat whole cane sugar. It's really good. It like does not affect, at least for us, it doesn't affect our glycemic index or our glucose response. I mean, so that's another great thing. You can customize the amount and the type of sugar in the desserts. Okay, let me see if I can get back to the presentation. There you go. Okay, so building a deep pantry. So we kind of touched on this a little bit with, cooking food to put into the freezer specifically. But I wanted to talk about this. So a deep pantry is just the idea that you have a food supply um, for more than a week, let's say, for your family. So a lot of people, they go to the store every single week, and by the end of the week, their cupboards are looking pretty bare. A lot of this can be a financial situation, but even with limited finances, you can still build a deep pantry. Like I said, we were living on $22,000 a year with student loans and a car payment and a mortgage and a new baby, and we were still able to put food aside for emergencies, and it's very important that you have food set aside. So let's talk about an emergency food supply of 30 days. So there are a lot of people who are going to recommend having a year supply of food, 6 months, 3 months, but my recommendation is just to start with 30 days. And there's a couple of reasons for that that I'll get into. But let's see here. Sorry, my camera's in the way. Okay, so having an emergency food supply on hand is very important for all of the unforeseen events in life, whether it's an extended medical issue, a job loss, or even a natural disaster. Knowing that no matter what comes your way, you're covered is very comforting. Contrary to what people think, I'm not actually storing up food against a coming societal collapse or a zombie apocalypse, though one of those might happen, hopefully not. We keep food on hand because having it has saved us many times in the past. During those hard times, we didn't have to worry about where our next meal would come from because we had already done the planning and hard work to ensure that we would have food when it was needed most. One of the examples that I like to give of how crucial this actually is a simple hurricane, a tornado, a flood. We've seen so many natural disasters over the last few years, and a lot of times those people are not able to get back into their normal supply chain for an extended period of time. Even here, we had Hurricane Harvey, which ended up being, it was like 150 miles away from us, but it still flooded our area so deeply that we actually couldn't get to the main highway for 3 weeks. And if we hadn't had our food supply, what would have happened to us? So, having a 30-day food supply is really, really important. And I would highly recommend you to seriously consider making this a priority for you and your family. It's not as hard as you think, and it can be done for as little as $100 per person for the full 30 days. And I will also add to that $100 per person for organic food. So if you don't care about organic, it will cost even less. And you can see here this picture is actually the 30-day supply for one person that I tend to recommend. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that next. So, creating a 30-day emergency food supply. Step one is going to be choosing the foods. Now, I know it probably seems really straightforward to choose foods for a supply because, it's just food. You shop all the time. But there are a couple of things that I recommend taking into consideration. One, that they're shelf stable foods. Don't just buy a bunch of stuff and put in your freezer and think that everything's going to be fine because you may or may not have power, you may or may not have water. So one of the things that I like to recommend, like I said, is just make sure that everything is shelf stable. Worst case scenario, you can open a can of chili and eat that right out of the can without heating it up. It would be gross, probably, but you'd survive. And so that's what I would recommend, making sure that things are shelf stable or can be pulled together without electricity, without a lot of water, or without heat if necessary. Um, and also, I would say making sure that whatever you buy, you like. So one of the things that I hear from people a lot is that, well, it's an emergency. I can eat anything in an emergency. So I'm just going to buy whatever's cheapest. And while that is probably true, you're going to make an already difficult situation even harder if you're miserable because you're eating soggy canned asparagus and you've never liked canned asparagus, but it was on sale one day, and so you bought 100 cans. Don't do that to yourself and your family. Just make sure that you have things that you like to eat on hand. So then you'll create a shopping list and make your purchases. If you already have some amount of food in bulk or even some extras, you can go ahead and just inventory what you have and remove that from your shopping list if you want. Just make sure that you're maintaining your list on a regular basis. And that's actually what I highly recommend. So, step three would be properly storing and rotating your food supply. Um, and this is pretty simple. You can make it simple. You can also make it really hard if you want to do that. But what I recommend is just keeping your food in your regular pantry. And then every time you use something in a week, just replace it. So that makes sure that your food is getting rotated on a regular basis. And it helps you make adjustments to your plan. If you're like, oh, I really didn't like that type of soup or whatever, you can make adjustments and buy a different type of soup over time to replace it or whatever. If you don't want to do that, if you don't want to have it in your rotation, you just want to tuck it away somewhere, then that's totally fine. I don't recommend it, but you can do it. If you're going to do that, go ahead and put it in a cool, dry place. Don't put it in your attic unless it's air conditioned. Don't put it in your garage unless it's conditioned as well. So you want to put it, you could put it under your bed, you could put it in the back of a closet, whatever you want to do. Just make sure that it's in a cool, dry place where rodents can't get to it and where heat is not going to damage the seals. And then from there, you still do want to rotate it properly. So every year, I would recommend pulling it out, using that food, and replacing it fully if you're going to do that. I have unfortunately heard from many of my readers that their family's procedure for emergency food supply as they were growing up and that they continued to do themselves was to buy a certain amount of canned food, shove it under the bed, and then not think about it, even when it was like popping and the seals were breaking and it was smelling terrible, because it was going to be fine if there was an emergency. I wouldn't recommend that. So I would say once a year, go ahead and inspect your supply if it's not in your regular rotation and make adjustments as necessary. Give me a second. I gotta take a drink. I also tend to forget to breathe when I'm talking like this, so I apologize. Okay, I'm just so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. All right, so I do have a free 30-day emergency food plan. It has all of the recipes, the shopping list, and everything for a shelf-stable emergency food plan. You can go to my website, amodernhomestead.com, and you can just search. There's like search icons and fields all over the website. And you can just search for emergency food supply. Obviously, this is food that my family tends to like. Most of it is just plain food, vegetable soup, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, that kind of thing, whatever. Where you can have ingredients that turn into multiple things. So, for example, you'll buy a bag of flour, but you'll use that to make bread or to make pancakes or whatever it is that's on the list. We have supplies for cooking over a fire in the event of a power outage. So there are things like bread and pancakes and stuff like that. So if you don't have that option, you'll want to adjust those accordingly. But you can get that, and it's a great list. It also is under $100 per person for organic food. That was at last evaluation, which I guess was a few months ago. Prices have gone crazy. And then, it's depending on your area. So give or take $100 for that list. But I highly recommend grabbing it to get you started quickly so that you're not caught without a food supply. Okay. Food preservation. This is one of my favorite things to do. It's so satisfying at the end of a day, especially when you're processing a lot of food in a day, to be able to look over your accomplishment. I love having an island full of canned food or a freezer full of, prepared foods that I've made that day. It really makes the effort enjoyable. And I love food preservation. So we're going to stay here for a little bit. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with each type of food preservation. So I'm just going to walk through each one quickly. I'm not going to get into like necessarily the meat of how to do each individual one. I do cover that a lot on my website. Oh, I was also going to mention modernhomestead.com does have a ton of from scratch cooking recipes as well as preservation and gardening and all that stuff. So everything that I talk about today, you're going to be able to find resources, recipes on my website so that you can get started with tried and true information that is safe and effective for you and your family. So, getting started with food preservation. So, like I talked about earlier, the easiest way to get started with it is to freeze extra portions. So, if you make a large lasagna, freeze half of it and just kind of get used to doing that. I know a lot of families don't like leftovers, so you can freeze the extra portions for a new meal a couple of weeks later if that's your family. We tend to eat the same thing all the time. So we have a pretty solid core group of recipes that we really enjoy and we just eat them to death. And then, of course, you can cook with purpose, which I also mentioned earlier. So if you wanted to, like I recently, like literally today, just finished processing 50 pounds of potatoes that I purchased from Azure Standard, and I turned those into mashed potatoes. I turned them into hash brown shreds. I turned them into shepherd's pies, and so on. And so I intentionally used those to fill up our freezer so that we had food available especially as we're going into the season where we tend to do a lot of homesteading work as we're setting up for the new year. I like to have meals on hand, and I'm sure there's things in your life, sports, work, whatever, that would be nice to have meals on hand for. So I highly recommend that. And then a water bath canning, which is a really simple process. You're gonna use this for fruits, and that can be just whole fruits in syrup. It can be jams or jellies, and then pickled vegetables. So not regular vegetables, like just a jar of green beans, but pickled vegetables. Anything that is high acid can be water bath canned. And so you don't need any special equipment. I really love water bath canning. It's a great place to start with more tried and true, shelf stable food preservation because you don't need anything except a big pot and some jars. And that's it. And you can water bath can. So I definitely highly recommend that. I do want to make a note that I get a lot of, which is comments like, my grandmother water bath canned green beans her entire life, and so do I. That's awesome. I have no problem with that. You do you. But current safe canning practices are that you can't water bath can vegetables that are not pickled or meats or beans. Those do need to be pressure canned. So, like I said, absolutely have no problem with that. Rebel canning, get after it. But I have to recommend safe canning practices. Okay. And then, of course, pressure canning, which I also love. And it took me a really long time to be brave enough to pressure can for the first time. Even though I was around it a lot growing up, it always freaked me out because the pressure canner hisses as it releases steam. And it just was kind of nerve-wracking that I always thought the pressure canner was going to explode. But I can tell you now that after pressure canning near daily for over 20 years, I've never had an issue as long as you make sure that your pressure canner is of high quality and that the valves are clean, you're not going to have a problem. I do have a couple of videos on my website and on my YouTube channel that walk you through in detail how to safely pressure can without that fear. So I do highly recommend it. The brand that I recommend for pressure canners is the All American brand. Like I said, I've been using mine near daily for over 20 years, and it looks like I just took it out of the box. It's perfect, pristine. You can see it in the back of that chili picture there. It was just taken a year ago, and that canner is over 20 years old. So it's a great brand. I highly recommend it. And then, of course, you can make shelf-stable soups of your own, chili, all sorts of things, vegetables from your garden, or from, the grocery store on sale, whatever you want, wherever you want to get them. Beans. I love canning dried beans. It makes it so easy to just open and have ready. You don't have to do the whole soaking process. And it's so cheap. Beans are cheap. So it's a great food to can. It also, I'll add, that when you can vegetables, meat, fruit, whatever, and use that in your emergency food supply, you also eliminate the need for water if there is an emergency for cooking. So if you have beans already soaked and canned, then you don't have to have that extra water on hand during an emergency in order to cook them. So,
Hey, Victoria, can I ask, Rachel
yeah,
has this question. Is
yeah.
pressure canning always safer? Why not just pressure can everything, even if it's okay to water bath it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, pressure canning, for one, it increases the heat dramatically. So if you're canning something delicate like peach halves or something like that, it's going to turn them to mush. You can absolutely pressure can things, but if you're familiar with pressure canning, or in case you're not, you have to put the jars in the pressure canner with the water kind of similar simmering but not boiling yet, and then you ratchet down the lid, and then you have to bring it up to pressure, and then you have to pressure can it for however long, 15 minutes to 90 minutes, and then you turn the heat off, and then you have to let the heat come all the way down, the pressure come all the way down before you can release the seal because it's under pressure. And so the process of bringing everything up to heat, letting it cook, coming back down can take a really long time. And so while you absolutely can pressure can something like a fruit or pickles, I wouldn't. For like I said, because a lot of things do turn to mush under the pressure, and then also just the extreme amount of time. I do use my pressure canner to water bath can because I just fill it up with water and use it like a big pot, and I don't put the lid on it and turn it and put it under pressure. So you can use it for water bath canning as well instead of having to have another big pot, but I don't tend to put those things under pressure.
Thank you.
Okay, and oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Um, I just wanted to follow that up with a question from Aaron about what do you recommend for
Sure.
the fear of botulism when canning?
I did like a mock run of this presentation earlier, and I mentioned that, and I forgot to mention it this time. So thank you so much for bringing that back up. So some vegetables do naturally have occurring botulism. So green beans tend to have naturally occurring botulism. It's something that is killed at proper temperature and stuff like that. So pressure canning gets those items up to the proper temperature to kill that botulism, whereas water bath canning doesn't because it doesn't have the additional heat production of the pressure. And so that is why pressure canning is recommended for those things to kill the naturally occurring botulism and other things that may be present.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so dehydrating. This is another form of food preservation that does require specialized equipment. There are dehydrators in all ranges of prices. So you can get one for, $30, or you can get one for $1,000. It just depends on what you want to do and honestly the shape that you want it to be. I like to have my trays uninterrupted. Some of the starter ones will have a hole in the middle and they're kind of like stacked. And I don't prefer that. I like to have a solid tray because if you're making crackers or um, fruit leather or something like that, then having, the solid tray is really nice. But you can dehydrate herbs, fruits, vegetables, eggs, jerky. This picture here on the bottom left is taco soup. So I used dry pasta. I dehydrated some bell peppers, and then I freeze dried some ground beef there in the middle, made my own taco seasoning. And then I had shelf stable taco soup that I could just dump into water. And that is one, example of how to use a dehydrator for shelf stable food as well. We have a large, very large fig tree that produces wonderful, delicious figs. And so we also dehydrate the figs. And then another example that I like to talk about is the bottom right picture is actually powdered spinach that we dehydrated. So we grow Malabar spinach, which if you're not familiar with that variety, but you want a really good hearty spinach, I would definitely recommend that. It vines. And so, you only need a couple of plants and then it'll take over like a whole trellis area. And it produces even through like multiple freezes. So you can have it for a really good long time. It produces all summer and it's really great. And so what we do is as that last freeze is coming that it's not going to survive, we'll harvest the whole plant and then dehydrate it and then use it anywhere that you would use herbs or like parsley or anything like that. We use it because I think it's each tablespoon is the equivalent of a cup or maybe 2 cups. Anyway, it's a lot of spinach. Um, and so it's a great way to get greens into like kids' diets. We would mix it in with our pizza sauce, and it was like the equivalent of 3 cups of spinach in the pizza sauce, and my son never knew. And so that's a really fun thing to do with dehydrating as well. And then of course, freeze drying, which I love. It took me probably 5 years to be willing to justify the cost of buying a freeze dryer, but it has paid for itself so many times over in just being able to buy food on sale that I wouldn't be able to can or freeze or dehydrate, and then being able to properly preserve it. And freeze drying does allow you to retain, I think it's 99.7% of the nutrients, and it's shelf stable for 25 years when stored properly. So that's a really great um, reason to go ahead and invest in a freeze dryer if you've been thinking about it. The picture on the top here is me holding a freeze dried whole egg. So I cracked the egg but didn't mix them. And so what we actually do is you can put water on this, like put this in a bowl, whole egg like that, and then put water on it. There's a ratio, I have it on my website. And then you can just fry it like a regular egg and it just tastes like a fried egg. It's amazing. And then here on the bottom are some things that I've freeze dried pretty consistently. So I've got, starting on the left side, we've got powdered milk, bananas on the top there, gummy bears, which puff up like Cheetos when you freeze dry them. So that's always a fun little thing. I give those away for Christmas because people love them. Strawberries, shredded cheese, raw cookie dough. It's so good. Raw cookie dough. And then avocados, apples, and peaches. You can even freeze dry things like entire portions of lasagna, slices of chocolate cake, sliced turkey. I mean, we've freeze dried everything that you can possibly think of. It's amazing. The only things that you can't freeze dry, just in case you're wanting to, would be butter and like maple syrup. You can't do all fat or all sugar items. I don't know why, but it just won't do it. So there we go. And then also remember, you don't have to grow a garden to be able to preserve food for your family. You can shop grocery store sales. Seasonal produce is a great way to put up a good pantry for your family by food preservation because, I always use this example. Are Organic strawberries are $2.50 a quart here in the spring. But in the winter, they're like $7 right now a quart. So if I had purchased those in the winter or in the spring and, canned them into jelly or froze them or freeze dried them or anything like that, then I would be enjoying those lower priced strawberries now instead of having to pay $7 or whatever. And you can do that for all sorts of different things. You also probably know people who are growing a garden right now, and most people who grow a garden are going to have produce that they are desperate to give to someone. So make yourself available to take that extra produce. And then also look for opportunities. So, for example, these kumquats here in the bottom left, one of our neighbors had this giant, gorgeous kumquat tree. I mean, it was probably 30 or 40 feet tall. It was covered up in kumquats every single year, and they never harvested them. And so one year we just went over and said, "Hey, do you mind if we come pick a bunch of kumquats?" And they said, "Please, oh my gosh, thank you." So we just bushels and bushels of kumquats, and we canned a bunch of kumquat jelly. All it cost me was the sugar and a little bit of time. So, look for those opportunities to be able to grab up produce and then start with your food preservation efforts. And then, if you are inclined, you can grow food wherever you are. If you are in a high-rise apartment in New York City, or if you have a half-acre backyard that you want to do some gardening on, you will be able to find something that you can grow. So I wanted to walk you through a couple of those ideas. This is my son here on the top right. Isn't he so cute? That was our first strawberry harvest, and he was so excited. Strawberries are his favorite. So all of these things are things that we have grown in one location or another that we have lived. So small space gardening can be done no matter where you live, and a lot of these things we grow even though we're not in a small space. So don't let the idea that you have more land, constrain you either. But container gardening is a great way to have a garden when you have not a lot of space, or um, you're in a rental property, or you just want something that's low maintenance, can be moved around, can be brought inside during inclement weather, and so on. Things like peppers, tomatoes, lettuce, sprouts, love growing sprouts, strawberries, and herbs can all be grown in container gardens. And even lettuce, sprouts, and herbs can be grown inside. So even if you don't have a balcony in your apartment, even if you are just looking at a window that you can put a couple of plants in, those things grow really, really well in those environments inside in a nice window. So don't let not having land stop you from growing some food. I'll also add sprouts are really easy to grow. It makes a ton of food. Like a tablespoon of sprouts, I think yields 8 cups of highly nutritious sprouts in about, what, 5 days? Yeah. So having a bag of sprout seeds on hand, you can usually buy them by the pound, will give you a lot of highly nutritious food availability, even if you're just growing that in your window. And then if you do have a small yard, you want to consider varieties that don't spread. I like to use the example of a pumpkin plant. So if you take one pumpkin plant and you don't trim it or anything like that, and you just give it as much space as it wants to grow, it'll take over a 30 by 30 space. It's happened many times to us where the pumpkin will just take over everything that's around it. So obviously, if your space is small, very limited, then you don't want to have a bunch of varieties that will do that and then compete for nutrients and just take over your space. So anything that's listed in the container gardening would be appropriate for that, except for tomatoes. If you don't keep them caged and trimmed, they will take over. One year we had one tomato plant that we didn't even cage it. We just let it vine on the ground like a watermelon, and it produced over 300 pounds of cherry tomatoes from that one plant. So definitely keep your tomatoes trimmed, but everything else would be fine to not spread. Other varieties would be corn, carrots, potatoes, okra, love okra, onions and garlic, and then any other root vegetable. So if you are wanting to start growing your own food, you absolutely can do that, no matter where you live. There was a mention about talking about natural pest control. And I'll just say this, we don't do a lot of pest control. In fact, we've really almost never had to do it, with two exceptions. The first exception is when we tried to plant something out of season. So when you plant out of season, the bugs find it because it's unusual to them for that time. And so they will gravitate towards it, and you will have a lot of problems if you're planting out of season. So just plant seasonal produce in the season that it's supposed to be grown in if you're planting outside. And then the other is when we planted too much of something in the same area. So for example, one year we were going to plant a half acre of potatoes. And we did. We planted a half acre of potatoes. Well, unsurprisingly, we got a ton of potato bugs. So if you plant a monocrop like that, you're going to get um, a lot of bugs because it's just easier. It's an easy target. It's a huge um, beacon for them to come and target it. So you can break that up by companion planting, usually strong smelling plants, either strong herbs or flowers. In the case of potatoes, we used marigolds interspersed pretty frequently, and that really, really helped. We didn't have any problems after that. So that's really all we do for natural pest control. I did want to mention that, and if you have any other questions specifically, let me know. And then, of course, if you have the opportunity to homestead on land, there are going to be more things that you can do. I'm not going to go into this right now because there are so many more things that you can do. I do cover a lot of additional information for gardening varieties, types of gardens that you can create, whether it's raised bed or back to Eden or hugelkultur or anything like that. You can also have chickens, which I talk about a lot in the book. And then our beautiful red Devon cows there. You can barely see the calf under the mama, but those are our sweet little cows. So you can do a lot more when you have land, but don't let the fact that you don't have land keep you from starting your homesteading mindset shift. Now, you may be thinking, this sounds very normal, and that's great because the truth is, it once was very normal and it should be still considered very normal. It was once expected that everyone, men, women, and children, know how to cook from scratch, grow a garden, preserve the harvest, and so on. These skills have been lost to many, but with more people learning them every day, I hope they will find their way back into common modern life. In just a moment, we will bring or get to some of your questions and answers about how you can bring more of these skills into your own life. But first, I wanted to invite you to join me online in this movement of modern homesteading. You can visit me online at modernhomestead.com. You can grab a signed copy of your book of this book rather at a modernhomestead.com/shop, and that's going to be, I think, the second product there in the middle of the screen when you go to the shop. And for right now, for the next 3 days, just for you guys, I'm doing free shipping on this book, so you can get it with no additional shipping or tax or anything like that. So I'd love to send those to you, signed copies. I do sign every single one of them myself, so it's not like a stamp or anything like that. You'll get an original signature. And then if you want to join the newsletter for the best and most up-to-date information about adding modern homesteading skills to your daily life, you can do that by going to amodernhomestead.com/newsletter. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can get to some of your questions.
Thank you, Victoria.
Yeah.
I love that. I think people have questions, lots of questions, so we're going to get right to them. But that was really such a great overview of what you do and how we can get started.
Thank you.
Um, Several people wanted to know if you have a generator, should the electricity go out?
So we actually opted for solar because we do live in Texas. Solar is a great option here. Because of where we live, getting fuel for the generators is not something that was really easy to envision in a time of like natural disasters. So we went solar. Our entire house is run on solar. And we also have concrete. So we built a concrete house. So it's 12 inches thick of concrete. So it's very well insulated. So the solar panels don't have to work as hard to keep everything cool. But yeah, we opted for solar after a lot of consideration over generators.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Excellent. We also have solar in my house, so I'm good too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Emily would like to know, do you have any tips on how to manage your freezers to keep it organized? I know you said to like
Yes.
check it every now and then.
Yeah. So, um, as far as keeping them organized, I have freezers that have different purposes. So I have a prepared foods freezer. I have two meat freezers that are organized differently, so they have different cuts in them. And then I have a fruits and vegetable freezer. There are things that I like to freeze instead of canning. So, for example, okra. I know a lot of people do can okra and love it, but I don't enjoy canned okra. So we always slice bread and freeze our okra, or just slice and freeze it, depending on what we're using it for. Um, and so it just kind of naturally stays organized because we have them um, you know, allotted for their various things. If you are managing a freezer that is a single freezer for all of your needs or an above kitchen freezer, then I would say, yeah, probably once a month, go ahead and pull everything out. Like literally just pull it out onto your dining table. Make sure that nothing got, shoved to the back, reorganize it and put it in. You can also use baskets depending on how many people you have in your family to yeah, make the most of the space that you have without having things get lost. You can have like a prepared foods freezer or a drawer, basket, whatever, desserts, that kind of thing. That makes it pretty simple.
And Cheryl asked, do you make and freeze the whole pizza or just the dough? Same with pies. Do you make and freeze a whole pie or just stack the pie crust?
I do both, But most of the time, I'm going to do the prepared food like you would buy it from the store. So most of the time, I am making a whole pizza that is ready to simply put in the oven. I'm making a whole pie that's ready to simply put in the oven. I don't freeze dessert pies that way. Don't eat a lot of dessert actually, but if I'm making it like a chicken pot pie, it'll be the whole thing. So I can just put it into the oven just like it would be from the store. Because the whole point when I'm doing those things is to save time. So if I don't have to make the filling or anything like that, then that works. For like during the holidays, I'll make a bunch of pie crusts and stack them, and then I can just pull them out when I need them. But for the meal prep, I do the ready to bake meal.
This is a question that I also have. Sarah says, "How do you freeze dinners like lasagnas and baked mac and cheese?" Because she bakes it in a glass dish, then the meth she cools it, cuts the portion, and wraps it in plastic wrap. Is that the best way to do this?
Actually, what I tend to do is I cook it in the glass dish. I cut it, I let it cool completely, like just on the counter. And then I'm gonna cut it into portions, and then I'll put it on like a wax paper lined or parchment paper, whatever you prefer, lined baking sheet. And then I'll freeze it like that. Then I take it out of the freezer and put those portions into a bag, just like a Ziploc bag or whatever. That way I don't have a bunch of individual portions wrapped. I'm not using a lot of plastic wrap to do that. And we also go through food really quickly. So I'm not cooking for like a year. So depending on how many people you have, how long you're cooking for in advance, if you're going to eat that stuff within 3 months, you don't need to wrap it. You can just put it in a Ziploc and then pull it out. And that's
Mhm.
what I would recommend.
Thank you. I just want to remind everybody to put your questions in the Q&A, which is a button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I'm trying to manage both, and it's getting a little difficult. Andrea said that a nutritionist told me not to use tallow in cooking due to the saturated fat. I hate to waste food and not use the tallow from cooking meat, so I continue to stubbornly use it to cook and bake regardless of what the nutritionist says. What's your take on this?
I think tallow is awesome. I think animal products in general have been shown many, many times, time and time again, to be better for us than other things. Um, you know, I don't love the taste of tallow. I'm gonna be honest. I prefer like coconut oil, like a really nice cold pressed coconut oil to fry things in because it has a more neutral taste. But tallow, bacon grease, lard, all of that stuff makes really great products. And yeah, I mean, I personally, we use it. We use all of that. If we're making bacon, I save all the bacon grease because if you've never had tortillas made with bacon grease, you're missing out. They're so soft. So yeah, I mean, that's my take on it as not a nutritionalist.
Use everything.
Yes.
Um, Deborah says that she's been told not to use, you had said freezing mashed potatoes, but she's been told not to use dairy products in them when freezing because they become soupy when you thaw them or you cook them on the stovetop. No, you haven't had that
Nope.
experience.
Nope. Exact opposite experience. Now, I'm sure it has to do with like how much you use in something. Like if you like your mashed potatoes really, 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 I would say, I'm going to say over milked.
Mm-hmm.
If you like them really, really loose, then that might be a problem. But I don't tend to do that. I mean, they're nice, creamy mashed potatoes, but they're not like, they're not oversaturated or anything like that. No, so I wouldn't freeze potato soup,
Mm-hmm.
but mashed potatoes where it's still more potato than milk, it's been fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Colleen says, how do you keep track of your supply things in your freezer? I mean, I noticed that you labeled everything. Do you date everything as well?
I don't tend to date things because we do eat things very quickly. I have had like I had a bag of biscuits that got left in the back of the freezer, and I knew I had not made that type of biscuit for like 3 years. And I was just like, well, let's see how these turn out. And I threw them in the oven and they were fine. They tasted like I had just made them that day. So, I mean, as long as something's not super covered in freezer burn, it's probably going to be fine as far as dating it. Um, what was the question? How do I keep it organized? What was the question
No,
again?
no. How do you know what's in there? Like, do you label,
Oh,
date, things like that?
Yes, I do label. Everything is in clear packaging except for like I have, and I really don't want to be using this, but I have not found an alternative that's reasonable yet. I have aluminum, like single use, um, freezer safe, oven safe dishes that I use. So if it's that and it's covered in foil, I'll write on the top of it. But everything else is in, um, clear bags. And so, yeah, I mean, really look, just look in there. And I would also recommend not packing your freezers if you can avoid it so full that you can't see everything pretty readily. Because not only is it going to be easy to lose stuff, but you're also going to tax your freezer and increase the possibility that due to a lack of airflow, it freezes up and you lose everything in the freezer. So if you can treat your freezer gently, then you'll also be able to see everything.
Hmm. Can you just remind us of what that spinach variety you talked about at some point was?
Yes, it's a Malabar spinach, spelled exactly how it sounds.
Yum, sounds good.
Yeah, yeah.
A couple of people wanted to know, where do you buy seed, especially organic seed, and how would you start in a small apartment or on a windowsill?
Yeah, so I buy my seeds for gardening from White Harvest Seeds. It's a small family-owned company, and they have just like amazing high quality seeds. I've never had any germination rate issues. They all germinate perfectly and great high quality produce. For sprouting seeds, I actually buy those in bulk from, oh, is it Frontier Seeds? One second, let me pull it up. Um, We also buy our tea from them, and I can't remember. Oh, my husband's the one who buys the tea. I'm almost done. You can get them organic sprouting seeds on Amazon even and find the company. I'm actually going there right real quick to see if I can find the company. And I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna go, of course. Oh, Star West Botanicals, of course. So Star West Botanicals has like broccoli seeds, alfalfa seeds for sprouting. So you can buy them by the pound and it's a lot cheaper. I wouldn't buy from like a gardening place for sprouting seeds because you need so many of them. And then as far as starting in an apartment, I would start with lettuce and sprouts. I really would. So sprouts, I love sprouts. I don't know. I've always loved sprouts. So maybe that's just a me thing. But they're so nutritious and really easy to make. So I have a whole walkthrough on my website for exactly how to sprout in a mason jar. Super easy. Like you literally need nothing except a window, and you barely even have to have any sunlight for them to work. So I would definitely start with sprouts. And then lettuce, again, it's a low sun requirement. You can do it in a windowsill. And if you get a variety of lettuce that is called a cut and come again lettuce, you can actually take the lettuce leaves from the outside and the middle will continue growing out. And so you don't have to like replant. You're not cutting the whole head off like you would at the grocery store. You're just pulling the outside leaves. So you might have like two or three heads if you eat a lot of salad, but that's a great way to do it. That's how I would recommend.
Carol wants to know, what equipment do you need to freeze dry foods? How does that work? And I'd like to follow that up with about sort of a more natural for dehydrating. Would you use your oven or the sun? Those are two different
It,
things, freeze
yeah,
drying and
for sure. For sure. So for dehydrating, in my area, I can't use the sun because we have so many fire ants here and so many bugs that it would be impossible. You can. I would just recommend getting a dehydrator that you can control the temperature on. So we do low temp dehydrating to maintain the nutrients. For your oven, most ovens don't go down below 175, which is too hot to dehydrate. You're not really dehydrating it at that point. And so in order to fully get all the water out, in order for it to be shelf stable, you would want to use a dehydrator. That's what I would recommend. As far as freeze drying food, you do need a freeze dryer, and it is a large expense. Um, and I do recommend the Harvest Right freeze dryers. If you go to my website and you type in freeze drying or freeze dryer, I have a lot of recipes. I have the cost breakdown of justifying the cost of a freeze dryer. It's definitely worth it. So how does it work? Really, honestly, all it is it's a unit that has 4 trays or however many trays you get, and you put the food on the trays, and then you close it, and then you hit the start button, and then when it's done, it beeps and you take it out. I mean, that is literally it. It's just amazing. Um, so cool. Usually it takes, depending on what you're freeze drying, because it is pulling the water out via that vacuum process. I mean, it can take anywhere from 2 to 5 days, depending on what you're freeze drying. So it is a process, but it's really, really great. Yeah, highly recommend.
Of all of the preservation methods you had spoken about, which one do you think is the healthiest for us?
Oh, that's so subjective. I
Yeah.
think so really they just all have their place depending on what you're preserving and how you're going to use it when you're done. So, as far as healthiest, um, freeze drying does preserve the most nutrients. It is also really expensive. If you're canning, let's say if you're pressure canning vegetables and you use the liquid in the vegetables, so for example, if you're making soup or something, you're getting all the nutrients that were in there anyway. It's only when you drain the liquid out that you lose a little bit of the nutrients. But even then, I mean, it's just like cooking it on the stove. So, yeah, that's subjective. I mean, obviously, water bath canning is going to have sugar or some sort of sweetener with it, probably if you want to maintain the flavor of the fruit, but you know, that's subjective. Yeah. They all have
Okay.
their place.
Excellent. Just do them all. How do you package food for freezing to keep it from getting freezer burn? Do you vacuum seal it?
I have never vacuum sealed it. I have a vacuum sealer. It's just one of those things that I can't get into my rotation when I'm cooking. I just put it in Ziplocs and I put it in the freezer and it's fine. It's fine. I mean, unless you're going to use it past a year, really, it's fine. 6 months would be, a no-brainer. Unless you do have a lot of freezer burn issues with your freezer. I mean, that's possible. I know some units do have that, and then you might want to consider vacuum sealing. But across the board, I wouldn't like blanket recommend it. No.
Okay. We have a lot of questions left, and we're going to go for about 10 more minutes, so we're not going to get to all of
Sure.
them. But
Okay.
I want to let you know that everybody here that Victoria's website is amazing. We're not just like trying to sell anything. It's really
Yeah.
amazing. Everything is on there. So if you have questions, you can definitely go there that we don't get to, and I'm sure you'll find an answer. Um, Colleen wants to know, what are your top three dinner plans that you eat over and over again? You said that you guys rotate.
We do, we do. So it's gonna sound really silly, but we love it. And so I'm gonna tell you. So the first thing is totally normal, and that is um, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, and then whatever green vegetable is in season. So that might be spinach, it might be Brussels sprouts, asparagus, whatever, green beans. So we eat that one just like constantly. And then quesadillas. We make our tortillas from scratch, and then we just use like meat and cheese and beans and just make quesadillas. And then the other one is actually waffles and hot chocolate. This is something that I don't know how it started, but my husband and I used to eat waffles and hot chocolate when we were first married. And then actually had 2 back-to-back miscarriages in 2019. And for the last one, I was bedridden for like 3 months. I literally couldn't do anything. And my husband, it was like the only thing he knew how to make was waffles and hot chocolate. And so we ate that just constantly. And so now it's just a favorite. My son loves it. We use fresh milled grains and raw butter and raw milk and fermented cacao. And I mean, it's delicious. Very little sugar in it actually, but that's what we tend to do. Other ones that might be more normal would be shepherd's pie and chicken pot pie, lasagna, and enchiladas. Those are the things, and pizza, those are the things that we tend to do. They're easy freezer meals and delicious.
Very delicious. Do you have information about your sourdough starter on your website?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so I'm going to
Yeah.
send Pascal over to your website for
Mm-hmm.
that question.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Um, Eilish has a question about meat slaughterhouses. She says they said they're very backed up, and small backyard chickens or rabbit farmers need to book 3 years ahead for slaughter slots before the animals are even born. In some cases, do you have
Yes.
any suggestions? Is the only solution self butchering, which I know most people will not do, which means they must be consumed in your own home.
Wait, go back. What?
So
Why, consumed in your own home? What do you mean?
Meaning, like, if you have an animal, you butcher it yourself, you're probably gonna have to eat it in your own home, or at least like
Oh,
in your
yes,
neighborhood.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
so is the question how to deal with it for selling or for your own personal? I'm confused. I want to answer the right question.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions for the backup? So there's, the all, but it doesn't affect us, right, on a regular basis if the slaughterhouses are backed up because they're still putting out food. We're getting it. So
Well,
I'm not.
let me the question about how to deal with if you raise a flock or raise a batch of rabbits or chickens. So one of the things that we have done in the past when, before Jason was like skilled in butchering himself, slaughtering himself, um, is we just found a local family in the area who typically, did hundreds of birds at a time. And we just asked if we could put ours in with theirs, and they just did them for us and we paid them for it. So that's what I would recommend. I personally am never, ever going to slaughter a chicken or a rabbit in order to eat it. I will go without meat for the rest of my life. I'm not going to do it. I don't love meat that much.
Yeah.
Um, Other people are not the same way. So, yeah, I would say if you're not comfortable with it, then find somebody in the area who is. I can guarantee you that there are many people in your area who are regularly slaughtering large quantities of small breeds, and they can put yours in the batch. That'll be fine. Yeah.
This is a question that I get all the time, especially in our environmental book club, is how do you store food without using plastic? Not the specific question, but how do you do this without plastic? Because she wants to avoid plastic, microplastics especially.
I completely agree with you. Haven't found a way that isn't also detrimental. So if you're storing in metal containers or even paper containers, they're still going to have a plastic coating on them. Glass is fine, but only for certain applications and only for certain shapes of foods. We spent a ton of money one year getting all stackable, same size glass containers, but they came with plastic lids. So
Mhm.
it was like infuriating. And so, unfortunately, if you're going to cook in bulk, I think it's pretty difficult to get away from. I will say this, though. I have confirmed that Ziploc specifically does not outgas or shed microplastics. And that's because their main source of revenue is actually the medical industry. And the medical industry specifically obviously cannot have microplastics in the things that they are processing samples and stuff like that for. So the Ziploc brand specifically does not outgas or, release microplastics into whatever you put into it. So that is what we exclusively use, and that has given me some peace of mind. But man, it's just tough. It's tough. So I don't have any solution for that because I'm still looking for one also.
Mhm. We use silicone bags that we reuse over and over again. I don't know. Have you used those?
I mean, it's still plastic. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's true.
I mean, yes, we do have some of those. But once I found out about Ziploc, I was like, okay, well, I feel a little bit more comfortable with that. Yeah.
Okay. Do you use hydroponics, like not soil-based growing?
Yeah, I am familiar with hydroponics. We haven't had an opportunity to really do that here. I have been trying to convince my husband to do it, but he is such a like an in-ground gardener that I can barely convince him to do raised beds. So no, we haven't tried it.
Okay. This is a good question from Karen. If if meat if there's meat during a power outage, if you have meat in the freezer, can I cook it and refreeze it when the power's back on?
Um, Yes, but if you take it out and cook it, what are you going to do with it? Or are you saying, okay, I see what you're saying. Um, so if the power is out for less than 3 days, you will probably be fine as long as you just don't open your freezer.
Hmm.
So if it has that mass, because meat freezes really hard and it's so dense that it will actually stay frozen for a really long time. So what I would recommend is waiting to see if it's the power is going to come back on within 3 days. If it doesn't, no, you cannot cook it once it's fully thawed if it's been like room temperature for any real amount of time. I mean, if you get to it and it's like 42 degrees, Fine, that's refrigerator temperature. That's fine. You can go ahead and cook it and refreeze it. But anything above that, I would recommend not eating. Just you don't wanna risk it. All sorts of bacteria can grow above that range. So
I love this question from Jennifer. Do you have any advice for homegrown barley for brewing your own beer? Is this something you've done?
this is not something that we've done. We do have a vineyard and we have made wine, but I have not grown barley. We have grown wheat, but unfortunately, every area is going to be so drastically different as far as when you plant that. So I would actually recommend contacting your county extension office and find out when they recommend planting that grain, and then just do some test patches and see how it grows in your area and expand from there. That's what we did. We grow our own einkorn wheat, and yeah.
I had seen that on your website and in one of your pictures. What is it? What is that?
So einkorn is the original wheat. It has never been hybridized, even back in ancient Egypt. It is the original wheat. And so most people who can't tolerate wheat in general, celiacs and stuff like that, they can actually eat einkorn without any side effects, because it doesn't contain the strain, the variety of gluten. I forget this scientific name for it, that modern wheat contains. And so, like, literally, it doesn't contain the same gluten that triggers celiac disease. There's a lot of debate about whether or not that's accurate, but we had the first einkorn bakery in the world, and we shipped all over the world, and we had just hundreds of thousands of clients who were all celiac and they were all eating our stuff on a regular basis daily with no side effects, including people were going to the doctor and having tests done to be like, am I having a reaction that I'm just not aware of? And there was no reaction. And we've also had it tested for gluten, and it is actually, by definition, gluten free, even though it does contain gluten. It's just not the type of gluten they're testing for when it comes to gluten. My son was severely celiac, and so we started using einkorn.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Rachel wants to know, can you comment on the supposed risk of food poisoning from growing and eating sprouts?
I would have to say that that is probably, I've never experienced it, obviously, but I do know that E. coli does breed in sprouts. You have to take into account a couple of things. One, mass production, handling by people who may or may not be practicing, best hand washing techniques, washing once it gets to the actual restaurant or food supplier, and then also how long it's been since the sprouts were actually created, because you're not getting those sprouts 3 days after they were that size. They're put into stasis with the cold temperatures in the warehouse and stuff like that. So that does give time for other things to grow that may grow, in different temperatures. So I would say if you're growing sprouts at home, the likelihood that you're going to have a problem because you're going to wash the jar, you're going to wash your hands, you're going to, those kind of things, you're going to eat them fresh. It's probably really, really, really low. That's my take on it.
Had you mentioned a brand to recommend for a freeze dryer?
Yes, I did. It's Harvest Right.
Yes. Okay.
There are a couple of brands out there right now, but that is the one that has been around the longest. Their machines are tested, and it's the brand that I have. I really love it. And like I said, there is a post on my website that breaks down the whole thing, what size you should get, if is it worth the money for your family? Like there's a whole thing on deciding and getting the right one.
Mhm. Do you water glass egg? If so, how long do they last and how do they taste?
Yes, I water glass eggs. We've done that so many times. We do that with all of our eggs, and well, all the eggs that we don't freeze dry or eat fresh. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, the process is really simple. I don't think the question was how to do it, but how long they last and how they taste. So I won't get into the details. I do have a video on my YouTube channel of how to do it if you want. But we've eaten them up to 18 months after water glassing, and they are shelf stable, which is crazy. And so really you can't tell the difference in the taste. They're a little watery. So if you're gonna like fry an egg, it might not be great. Um, if you don't do it just right, they don't separate the yolks from the whites because they get a little waterlogged, and so they tend to mesh together a little bit too much. But if you do it well, it is indistinguishable from a fresh egg, up to 18 months after water glassing them. It's amazing.
It's amazing. Okay, I just have one last question
Sure,
because we're
go for
at
it.
8:15. Do you grow microgreens?
No, not beyond sprouts. So we just, if we microgreens, they're a little bit older than sprouts, but we just stop at sprouts because I love them. So that's what we do. Yeah.
I love that you just talk about the things that you love and we can love as well. Okay, so can you repeat your website, and I will put it in the recap email
Yes.
as well so people can go to it and learn everything.
Yes, it's just a modernhomestead.com. And the link for the book is amodernhomestead.com/shop. And then the newsletter is a modernhomestead.com/newsletter. So I made it pretty simple for y'all. And oh, and just as a reminder, I am doing free shipping on the book for the next 3 days for a signed copy. So be sure to grab it there.
Perfect. I will definitely tell everybody that in my recap email.
Great.
Victoria, thank you so much. This has been incredibly like I've learned so much.
Good.
Can't even tell you. I feel like back into my kitchen and making something.
Well, good. I'm
um,
glad. Thank you for
so
having me. I appreciate it.
absolutely. And thank you all for being here and your wonderful questions. And I hope you all have learned a lot as well. And we'll see you again at some point. Maybe you'll have from scratch cooking tonight or tomorrow. Take care.
Bye.